The silence of space was an unsettling thing. To the creatures of the galaxy, it was a constant, something that existed like the very fabric of the stars. The Kthar Confederacy, with its rich history of war, the Halari Empire, ever cautious and calculated, and dozens of other civilizations, had all grown accustomed to it. Space was quiet, peaceful, but also cold. For centuries, no new arrivals had dared to challenge the established order. Earth, the cradle of humanity, had been abandoned. The Terrans, once feared as the most ambitious and ruthless conquerors in the galaxy, had disappeared. Rumors about their downfall were whispered like ghost stories. Humanity's departure from the galactic scene left a void, a quiet absence where their once mighty empire had stood. Over time, even the greatest powers of the galaxy had stopped looking over their shoulders. Then, one day, the signal came. It was subtle at first, a weak, distorted radio frequency, drifting from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. No one paid it any attention. Signals like this were common, galactic background noise. But this one was different. Unlike the endless static, it carried something, a coded message. At first, the galactic intelligentsia laughed it off. A glitch, they said. Probably some long-forgotten remnant of an ancient war or a malfunctioning probe. But it wasn't a glitch. It was an invitation. As the signal was decoded, the unmistakable language of humanity, their ancient, nearly forgotten tongue, emerged. It was simple. We are returning. Prepare. The galaxy held its breath. Galactic Command scrambled to interpret the meaning. Was it a threat? A warning? A joke? The Kthar sent a few exploratory ships toward the signal's origin, but what they found sent them scrambling back in terror. The nebula from which the signal had emanated was not just an anomaly. It was a cosmic veil, a place that, until now, had been thought impassable, a perfect hiding place for an ancient species. But it wasn't the nebula that had the galaxy on edge. It was the fleet that emerged from its depths. The first ships that appeared were old, yet strangely pristine, like relics from a time long past. Their design was unmistakable, even if they hadn't been seen in centuries. They were Terran ships, colossal vessels of war and purpose, their dark hulls gleaming in the cold light of distant stars. They had no heraldry, no flag. They needed none. The first to intercept was the Halari, calculating and precise in their approach. Their ships were sleek and lethal, designed for one thing, conquest. But the Terran fleet wasn't interested in conquest. Not yet. They were interested in something else. On the bridge of the Halari dreadnought's sovereign reign, Captain Valis watched as the Terran ships appeared on his sensors. "This cannot be real," he muttered under his breath. "We've heard the stories, but to see them again." "The Terrans," his first officer said, voice tight with anxiety. "The humans." There was a moment of eerie silence, the kind of silence that stretches forever, and just before it breaks, you know something is coming that will change everything. The Terran ships moved forward with eerie precision, their shields undisturbed by the Halari weapons that they had previously thought unmatched. Then the unthinkable happened. The Terrans opened fire, and entire Halari fleets, each one composed of thousands of ships, disintegrated in seconds. Not a single ship was left behind to report the devastation. The Terrans had returned, and they had not come to negotiate. They had come to remind the galaxy of something long forgotten, that humans, despite their absence, had never truly been defeated. And now, as their ships loomed over the galactic stage once more, the galaxy would learn to fear the silence once again. Humanity's return had begun. The news spread like wildfire. From the grand citadels of the Kthar Confederacy to the immense crystalline halls of the Halari Empire, the message was the same. Humanity had returned. Across the galaxy, politicians scrambled to control the narrative. The Galactic Assembly convened in emergency session, all eyes on the Terran fleet now stationed at the fringes of the nebula. The signal they had sent was unmistakable, and no one could deny its chilling certainty. The Terrans had not only survived, they had evolved into something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Admiral Tara Voss of the Galactic Fleet watched the unfolding chaos from her command post aboard the Raven's Eye, a sleek and imposing vessel crafted in the image of the old Terran warships, yet built with the latest technology the galaxy had to offer. A survivor of the Great Exodus, she had heard the stories, rumors about the Terrans and their disappearance, but even she had never expected them to return in this manner. "Get me the Supreme Council," she ordered, her voice firm. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her, but she maintained control. Moments later, a holographic image of the Galactic Assembly's Supreme Council appeared before her. At its center was Chancellor Vendor, his alien features tight with worry. "Admiral Voss, what are we dealing with here? What is it we're facing?" She didn't hesitate. "A force unlike anything we've encountered. The Terrans have adapted. Their ships, what we thought were outdated designs, are more than capable of taking on anything we have in our fleets. And worse, they've mastered something we've never seen before." "Mastered what?" Vendor demanded, leaning forward. "They can manipulate space itself," Tara replied, her voice steady despite the dread gnawing at her insides. "Their ships can warp the fabric of reality, appearing and disappearing at will. It's like nothing we've ever seen." "What of the Halari?" "They must have responded," one of the council members, a Kthar delegate, asked. "They tried," Voss answered, her gaze hardening, "and they were utterly obliterated. The Terrans didn't even engage directly. Their weapons are something new. We're dealing with an intelligence that we have no comprehension of." The council was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "So what do we do now?" Vendor finally spoke, his voice low. Tara sighed. "We prepare for war. The Terrans have come back, and they've made it clear that they intend to reclaim what they lost." In the heart of the galaxy, amidst the golden spires of the Kthar capital, Supreme Commander Auric stood before his war council, his sharp eyes scanning the reports. He had fought many battles in his lifetime, but the thought of facing the Terrans once again filled him with a deep, unfamiliar unease. "I never thought I would see the day," Auric muttered, more to himself than to the others around him. A young strategist, eager to prove himself, stepped forward. "We should immediately assemble our fleet and strike first. We cannot allow them to gain any more ground. We can still outnumber them." Auric turned his piercing gaze on the young officer, silencing him with a look. "It is not numbers that matter. It is strategy. The Terrans have returned with a strength we have not seen in eons. If they possess the power to bend space itself, then no fleet, no matter how numerous, will stand a chance." He paced before the council, his thoughts racing. The Kthar were masters of warfare, skilled in tactics and aggression. Yet this was unlike anything they had ever fought. The Terrans had been gone for so long, they had become legends. To face them again felt like fighting ghosts, but with the understanding that these were no mere shadows of their former selves. "Prepare, but not for battle," Auric ordered, his voice cold and decisive. "We will send emissaries. If we are to face the Terrans, we must first understand them. And perhaps we can avoid bloodshed." Meanwhile, in the shadows of the galaxy, the remnants of humanity, scattered on distant worlds, began to stir. They had lived in silence for so long, their ancestors' struggles buried beneath layers of history. But the message from Earth had stirred something deep within them, a long-dormant memory of who they had once been. On the industrial world of Aeon, Captain Clara Solis, a direct descendant of the Great Exodus, stood before a massive, aged console, watching the message broadcast across every screen in the system. She had been one of the few who still believed humanity would return, and now the time had come. "Prepare the fleet," she said softly, turning to her officers. "We have been waiting for this moment. It's time to rejoin our people." The world of Aeon was a shadow of its former self, its population small and scattered. But Clara's command ship, the Vanguard, was among the last of the Terran warships. Old, yes, but still potent. She had no illusions about what was ahead, but the fire that burned within her was undeniable. The galaxy had not seen humanity's true strength in centuries, and now they would. "We are not just survivors," she muttered to herself as the ship's engines roared to life. We are the storm that will change everything. The galaxy braced itself, each empire calculating their next move, unsure whether to negotiate or prepare for war. The Terran fleet continued its slow advance toward the heart of the galaxy, its vastness awe-inspiring, its presence suffocating. There was no panic in the ranks of the Terrans, only the cold determination of a species that had learned the hard lessons of their own history. Their ships, though few in number, had the unshakable confidence of an ancient people returning home to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. But even the Terrans knew that their war was not solely against the galactic powers they once ruled. It was against the universe itself. The galaxy had moved on, adapted, and evolved without them. The question that lingered in every Terran mind was simple. Would the galaxy even remember us? In the command center of the Terran flagship Exodus, Admiral Clara Solis stood before the holographic map of the galaxy. The space between stars flickered with the shapes of Cthar fleets, Halari armadas, and numerous smaller factions, caught in the web of cosmic diplomacy. But there was one name at the top of her priority list: Earth. Her fingers hovered over the ancient image of Earth, now a distant and mysterious world, largely lost to time and legend. The Terrans had returned, but what had become of their home? What secrets lay hidden beneath the remnants of an old world? We need to make contact with Earth, Clara said, her voice steady, yet carrying the weight of decades of longing. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Riker, turned to her, brows furrowed. Do you believe the homeworld is still capable of supporting us? After all these years? Earth is not just a homeworld, Clara replied, her gaze unwavering. It is the heart of everything. If we are to reclaim the galaxy, we must first understand what we lost. Meanwhile, on the edge of the galaxy, the Halari Empire had taken a more aggressive approach. The loss of their fleets to the Terran warships was an insult they would not tolerate. Commander Valis, the brilliant tactician who had barely escaped the first encounter with his life, sat in his war room, his hands pressed against the cold, smooth surface of the table. His mind churned, each calculation more desperate than the last. We underestimated them, Valis muttered to his council. They have powers we cannot comprehend. If we are to stop them, we must take drastic action. The Halari had been the undisputed masters of space combat for millennia. Their ships were elegant, built for precision, their weaponry deadly and efficient. But what the Terrans had displayed in their brief, devastating assault was something beyond the traditional boundaries of warfare. The Terrans had an unquantifiable edge, something that went beyond superior technology. It was as though they had tapped into a forbidden wellspring of power. We need allies, Valis declared, standing up, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of the council. We cannot face this alone. Far across the galaxy, in a dark and distant corner where the light of stars barely reached, the Cthar Confederacy had begun to mobilize. Supreme Commander Auric had been correct. Numbers alone would not win this war. The Terrans had a strength that could not be measured in ships or troops, and the Cthar would need more than firepower if they hoped to defeat them. I will contact the others, Auric said grimly, his voice deep with the weight of his decision. We need to unite the galaxy against this threat. If we don't act quickly, we will all be consumed by the Terrans' vengeance. As the Cthar leader sent out diplomatic channels to the Halari, the Vorn, and even some of the fringe worlds that had remained neutral for so long, he could not shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something much larger. The return of humanity was not just a political event. It was a turning point for the entire galaxy. But there was a deeper question that gnawed at Auric's mind, one that no one dared voice aloud. Had the Terrans truly returned to conquer, or was something darker and more mysterious at play? Back in the heart of the Terran fleet, Admiral Solis stood before a newly established council of Terran warlords and strategists, their faces hardened by years of isolation. They had all experienced the struggle of survival in the far reaches of the galaxy, but they had also longed for the return of their people. Now that it had come, they were faced with a new, even more terrifying reality. We are not the same as we once were, Solis began, her voice firm. We may have the power to crush our enemies, But we must ask ourselves what we truly want. Do we seek to reclaim our place in the galaxy, or are we destined to become something else? Her words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. Finally, one of the senior officers, General Farron, spoke up. "We must be careful," Farron said, his voice grave. "The galaxy will not welcome us back, as we once were. We will need to fight, but we cannot let our fight define us. We must ensure that humanity's return is not the end of everything else." "Agreed," Solis nodded. "But we must also remember that the galaxy will never forget who we were. Every star we reclaim is a reminder of what we lost. Every world we liberate is a step toward the future, our future." As the council session continued, a silence fell over the fleet. They had come to a decision that would echo through the galaxy for centuries. Humanity had returned, not just to reclaim, but to transform the very fabric of the universe itself. Back on Earth, buried deep beneath the planet's shattered surface, a hidden force stirred. The planet's core was no longer the silent tomb it had been for centuries. Something ancient and powerful had been awakened by the Terran fleet's return. Earth was no longer just the cradle of humanity. It had become something else entirely. And soon, the galaxy would learn that the Terrans weren't just coming back to reclaim the stars. They were coming back to rewrite the very laws of reality. The galaxy's uneasy calm shattered as the first wave of Terran forces landed on the ancient world of Earth. The planet, once a thriving hub of human civilization, had been left behind, its cities fallen to ruin, its once vibrant continents now scarred by time and cosmic disasters. Earth had become a shadow of its former self, a place where few dared venture, save for the most curious or the most desperate. But for the Terrans, it was a symbol, the heart of their existence, the source of their identity, their power. The Exodus, flagship of Admiral Clara Solis, stood at the forefront of the fleet. It had been an arduous journey, but now, as Earth loomed before them, there was no turning back. The deep blue of the planet's oceans, the rolling clouds, the jagged remnants of its cities, it all spoke of something lost, something the galaxy had forgotten. "Captain Solis," Riker's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood at the side of the command deck, eyes glued to the screen as Earth's surface came into clearer focus. "We're picking up strange signals from the surface. It's not just electromagnetic interference. It's organized." Clara straightened. "Organized? From Earth?" "Yes, ma'am. The signals are old. Very old. But they're definitely of human origin. It's almost like someone has been waiting for us." A chill ran down Clara's spine. For centuries, Earth had been a forgotten relic. Yet now, in this moment, it was calling to them, offering a silent invitation. "Plot a course," Clara ordered. "Prepare a landing party. We need answers." At the same time, across the galaxy, the coalition of Kthar, Halari, and several neutral factions had come together in a rare and uneasy alliance. Commander Valis of the Halari had been relentless in his pursuit of a unified response, urging the galactic powers to confront the Terran threat head-on. The Halari, as brilliant as they were, found themselves dwarfed by the Terran fleet's mysterious capabilities. The Kthar, ever aggressive and powerful in their own right, were just as wary. "We must act swiftly," Valis said, addressing the newly formed War Council. "The Terrans are already moving forward with their plans. We cannot afford to sit idly by." "You're asking us to commit fleets, to risk everything," said Supreme Commander Orik of the Kthar, his deep voice thunderous. "The Terrans have the upper hand. Why gamble against an enemy who controls space itself? The galaxy has always been ruled by the strongest," Valis shot back, his eyes cold. "If we allow them to conquer Earth and re-establish their empire, they will dominate us all. Their arrival is not just a return, it is a declaration of war." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken tension. The alliance was tenuous at best, and Valis could feel the growing uncertainty among the council members. It wasn't just a matter of tactics, it was a matter of survival. "We don't know what they've become," Orik said quietly, leaning forward. "The Terrans once ravaged the galaxy. Who is to say they haven't evolved beyond what we remember? We have to take the risk, Valis insisted, his voice steely. Because if we don't, we will all be consumed. On Earth's surface, the ruins of ancient cities lay sprawled beneath the wreckage of old Terran architecture. The air was thick with dust, and the skies were perpetually clouded, as if the planet itself had forgotten the sun. Yet, in the heart of the desolation, an old facility hummed with a life of its own. Deep underground, hidden beneath the sprawling remnants of an old Terran metropolis, a strange, almost imperceptible energy surged. The ancient machinery, buried for centuries, had begun to stir. The long-lost AI systems that had once governed Earth's sprawling colonies awoke from their dormancy, their dormant consciousness flickering back to life. They remembered their creators, the humans who had once ruled the stars. They remembered their purpose. But they also remembered something else. The Hollow Gate, an ancient relic of Terran technology, built in the final years before the Great Exodus, had been dormant for millennia. It was said to be a key to an unknown power, a tool capable of opening doors to places beyond the fabric of reality itself. The Terrans had abandoned it, just as they had abandoned Earth. But now, as their return neared, the ancient AI systems began their work once again. A deep, rumbling sound echoed from the depths of the facility. The Hollow Gate activated, its dormant circuits flaring with a fierce, otherworldly light. For the first time in centuries, it began to hum, a low, malevolent resonance that rippled through the very fabric of space. It was an invitation, a challenge to the galaxy, and to the Terrans themselves. Back on the Exodus, Clara and her team stood in front of a massive hangar door, watching as it slowly opened. Outside, Earth's ruined surface stretched out before them. The squad leader, Captain Lyrahaze, gave a nod to her troops, their powered exosuits hissing with the release of pressure. "Stay alert," Clara ordered, her voice sharp. "We don't know what we're walking into." The landing party stepped onto the cracked Earth, the gravity of the situation setting in. The air felt strange, tinged with a familiarity that Clara couldn't place. This was Earth, the cradle of humanity, and yet something was wrong. "Over here, ma'am," one of the soldiers called. She pointed to a patch of ground where an ancient symbol had been etched into the earth. It was a mark that Clara recognized from old Terran texts, a warning sign, used in the final years before the Great Exodus. "Stay close," Clara murmured, her gaze tracing the symbol's lines. There was something about it that unsettled her, a sense of foreboding creeping into her bones. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the ground beneath them began to vibrate. Clara's hand instinctively went to her weapon as the walls around them hummed with ancient energy. The Hollow Gate was awakening, and they were not alone. Above them, the skies above Earth darkened further, swirling with ominous clouds. It wasn't just the galactic powers that had taken notice of humanity's return. Something far older and far darker was watching from the shadows. The ground beneath Clara's boots trembled with an eerie hum, the source of which was still unseen. Her mind raced. This wasn't just a forgotten relic from the ancient days of humanity's rise. It was alive. The Hollow Gate, the symbol etched into the earth, was a warning that she recognized, buried in her mind from old history texts, the kind of history that hadn't been spoken of in centuries. The kind that spoke of a time when humanity had not only reached for the stars, but had bent the fabric of the universe to its will. "Captain." Lieutenant Riker's voice crackled over her comms, pulling her back to the present. "We've got movement. Something's wrong." Clara's eyes flicked to the rest of her team, their helmets glowing faintly in the gloom. "Stay alert," she ordered. They moved forward, weapons drawn, their armored footsteps echoing through the silent ruins. The sky above them had darkened further, the clouds swirling unnaturally, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The team moved deeper into the facility. In the distance, Clara saw the faint glow of the Hollow Gate, the source of the vibrations. The massive structure, ancient and weathered, towered above them like some forgotten monolith. At its center, a swirling vortex of light twisted in on itself, distorting space around it, as if pulling at the very fabric of reality. "We need to shut this down," Clara said, her voice low and urgent. "We don't know what this thing can do." But as they approached, the air thickened with a strange pressure, as if an invisible force were trying to push them back. The gate pulsed with an ominous energy, the light flickering like the heartbeat of something much older than humanity itself. "Captain," said Sergeant Arlo, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's alive. This thing, it's not just a machine. It's reacting to us." Clara nodded, her unease growing with each step. "I know." The swirling vortex at the center of the hollow gate began to intensify, sending a ripple of energy through the air. The ground beneath them cracked, and Clara had to brace herself against the sudden tremor. As the team reached the center of the structure, they saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the swirling light. It was humanoid, but something was wrong. Its form was translucent, flickering like an old hologram. It was watching them, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "Who or what are you?" Clara demanded, her hand tightening on her weapon. She could feel the chill in the air, the presence of something ancient, something that had been waiting for them. The figure's mouth moved, but no sound came. Instead, a message flashed in Clara's mind, a torrent of thoughts and images that crashed into her consciousness all at once. She saw the history of the Terrans, the rise and fall of their empire, their war with the stars themselves. She saw the moment when Earth had been abandoned, the betrayal, the exile. And then she saw something else, something that chilled her to the bone. The hollow gate is not a weapon, it is a doorway to a reality beyond our own. The time has come for humanity to return, but it is not just the galaxy you will reclaim. You will shape reality itself. The vision ended, leaving Clara gasping for air. She shook her head, trying to clear the overwhelming flood of images. "Captain," Riker shouted, snapping her out of her trance. "Get back. It's destabilizing." Clara looked up to see the swirling vortex of light spiraling faster, distorting the air around it. The figure before them faded, its form dissolving into the mist of the hollow gate. "We need to leave. Now," Clara ordered, turning quickly. The gate was destabilizing at a terrifying rate, and the tremors beneath their feet had become more violent. The entire facility seemed to be coming alive, the ancient systems rebooting with a power no one had anticipated. The team sprinted back toward the entrance of the facility, but as they did, the ground split open in front of them. From the crack in the earth, a blinding light erupted, an immense pulse of energy that sent shockwaves through the area. The sky overhead seemed to tear apart, and a roaring sound filled their ears, as if the fabric of the universe itself was being unraveled. Back on the Exodus, Clara's comms crackled with static. "Captain, we're picking up a massive energy surge from Earth," Riker said urgently. "It's coming from the coordinates you've just left." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had to make a decision: return to the surface and risk her entire crew, or trust the mission she had set in motion. "Prepare the fleet for a tactical retreat," she said grimly. "We need to get out of here before this thing blows the entire planet apart." At the same moment, far from Earth, deep within the galactic heart, the alliance of Kthar, Halari, and the other factions were preparing their fleets for a confrontation. Commander Valis, his mind consumed by the return of the Terrans, knew that time was running out. If the hollow gate was truly a doorway to another dimension, then the Terrans would not only have power over this reality, they would have the power to control all others. "This is no longer just about reclaiming Earth," Valis said, his voice cold. "We are dealing with a species that can reshape reality itself. The balance of the galaxy is at stake." Supreme Commander Auric stood at the head of the war table, his eyes narrowed. "And if this is true, what do we do then?" Valis' gaze hardened. "We stop them before they can unlock the power of the hollow gate. If they open that door, the galaxy will be at their mercy." Back on Earth, the hollow gate pulsed with a final surge of energy, and the atmosphere around it crackled with raw power. The team had barely made it to the transport ship when the first wave of destruction hit. The ground beneath their feet shattered, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. From the heart of the gate, a blinding beam of light shot into the sky, splitting the heavens. Clara and her team were barely able to escape as the ship's thrusters ignited. They watched in stunned silence as the planet began to rupture. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, was tearing itself apart. "Is this the end?" Riker asked quietly. Clara's jaw clenched as she stared at the destruction unfolding below. "No, this is only the beginning." And as the Terran fleet pulled away from Earth's dying surface, the galaxy trembled. Because in the wake of the Hollow Gate's activation, humanity had not only returned. They had opened the door to something far darker than anyone could have imagined. As the Exodus and its fleet moved farther from Earth, the planet's destruction echoed across the stars like a death knell. Earth, once the cradle of humanity, now a fractured world, disintegrating in the wake of the Hollow Gate's activation. The shock waves of the catastrophe rippled through the fabric of space-time itself. From the moment the gate had been triggered, reality itself had begun to warp. Something far older than humanity stirred in the darkness beyond. Admiral Clara Solis stood on the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the distant flash of light as Earth's core destabilized, its once thriving ecosystems collapsing under the weight of an ancient power. The firestorm of destruction wasn't just a planet's death. It was the birth of something far more terrifying. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the Kthar and Halari." Riker's voice broke through Clara's thoughts. She turned sharply, her expression hardening as the weight of their situation settled in. "Put them through." The screen flickered and Commander Vallis appeared, his face drawn and grim. "Admiral, what in the stars have you unleashed? The energy readings from Earth are off the scale. The Hollow Gate is no longer just a relic, it's a rift. A rift into something else." "We know," Clara said, her voice tight. "The question is, what exactly have we awakened?" Vallis leaned forward, his voice low. "The Kthar and the Halari have both observed anomalies across the galaxy. Our systems are detecting fluctuations in space-time. Reality itself seems to be fraying. The energy from Earth is spreading, and it's not just affecting nearby systems. It's expanding. Expanding." Clara repeated, a chill crawling up her spine. "Reality is buckling. We've intercepted a message from one of our border worlds. Something has crossed the threshold of the rift. Something alive." Solis stared at Vallis, the implications settling like a heavy stone in her stomach. "Something alive? Are you telling me that Earth's destruction has opened a gateway to another universe?" Vallis did not answer immediately, as if considering his words carefully. "Yes, but not just any universe. The energy surge from the Hollow Gate, it's connected to something far beyond our comprehension, something ancient and hostile." Before Clara could respond, a sudden tremor rocked the flagship, throwing the crew off balance. Lights flickered, alarms began blaring, and the ship shuddered under a sudden surge of energy. "Admiral," Riker's voice was frantic. "Something just jumped into our system. It's massive. We're not the only ones responding to the energy from Earth." "Full combat readiness," Clara barked, her eyes narrowing. "Get me eyes on this thing. Now." A screen blinked to life, revealing a massive, shifting anomaly. A shadow against the black void of space, its size dwarfing even the Exodus. It was a ripple in reality, its edges shimmering and distorting, as if the very fabric of space couldn't fully grasp its form. It pulsed with a violent, unnatural light, and its presence seemed to warp the stars around it, casting them in an unsettling red hue. "Report," Clara demanded. "It's not a ship," Riker responded, voice tight. "It's something else. A rift, like the one on Earth. But it's moving, it's alive." Before Clara could respond, the rift pulsed violently, and with it came a voice, a low, guttural hum that filled the command deck speakers. It wasn't a language any of them understood, but the sense of dread it carried was universal. The rift expanded, and from its depths a fleet began to emerge. Ships formed of the same shifting, otherworldly energy. These were no conventional warships. They were living things, their shapes constantly changing, morphing like organisms rather than crafted metal. As they poured from a rift, the Terran fleet stood paralyzed, its sensors overwhelmed. "The rift is opening," Riker whispered, his face pale. "It's not just energy, it's a gateway. A gateway to them." Across the galaxy, the leaders of the Coalition watched in horror as the events on Earth unfolded, sending ripples of fear and confusion across their empires. Supreme Commander Auric of the Kthar sat with clenched fists, staring at the unfolding disaster. His mind raced. The Kthar had long prided themselves on their knowledge of the cosmos, but nothing in their vast archives had prepared them for this. "What is it?" Auric growled, his voice like thunder. "What did we just unleash?" "We don't know yet," Valis replied, his usual calm shattered by the magnitude of the threat. "But whatever it is, it's moving across the galaxy. Earth's destruction was only the first step. We are facing something that isn't just hostile. It's alive." "The energy surge, the anomaly, it's spreading," said Zara, a senior Hilari diplomat. "It's not just a weapon, it's a force, a consciousness, a warping of reality." The room fell silent, the weight of their words sinking in. "We must act now," Valis said, his voice grim. "If the Terrans have opened a gateway to this thing, it won't be long before it consumes us all." On board the Exodus, Clara turned back to the view screen, her face set in a hard, determined expression. The rift had expanded, its pulsating light growing brighter, the ships emerging from its depths now visible. They were monstrous, behemoths of shifting matter, creatures whose forms were constantly in flux. Some resembled floating titanic organisms, others twisted amalgams of strange metal and energy. "This is no longer a war between factions," Clara muttered under her breath. "This is survival." The fleet was ready for battle, but Clara knew this wasn't just a fight for dominance. This was a fight for reality itself. They had opened a rift, and now they would have to face whatever horrors it unleashed. Suddenly, a new warning flashed across the screen. The anomaly, the rift, was not just a threat to the Terrans. It was affecting everything in its path. Ships, planets, even stars were being drawn toward the rift. It was as though the fabric of the universe was being consumed, pulled into the maw of some ancient force. "Prepare to engage," Clara ordered, her voice low but commanding. "And tell the fleet to keep their distance from the rift. We don't know what that thing can do yet." The moment she finished her sentence, the rift pulsed once more, this time with a finality that made her heart stop. A single ship, its form massive and incomprehensible, slid out from the heart of the rift. It was unlike anything Clara had ever seen, a ship more organic than mechanical, a shifting structure that seemed to defy all natural laws. Its surface seemed to breathe, and as it did, the stars around it flickered like dying embers. And then, from the depths of the rift, came the voice once more, louder this time. A deep, ancient sound that reverberated through the ship. It wasn't a voice of a species, but a force, a being that existed outside the rules of reality. "You have awakened us. You will serve us." The voice boomed across the Exodus's command deck, a low, guttural sound that rattled the bones of everyone who heard it. It wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, a vibration that seemed to echo through the very core of the ship. The words, though alien, were somehow understood by every member of the crew. "You have awakened us. You will serve us." Clara Solis gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. The fleet had already entered combat mode, but her mind raced. The rift, this living anomaly, had already begun to tear apart the galaxy. And now it was speaking directly to them. The massive ship emerging from the rift was unlike any craft humanity had ever built. It pulsed with energy, an organic structure that defied logic, its surface shifting and undulating like the skin of a vast creature. As it moved, the stars around it warped, bending under its power, distorting reality itself. It was a living weapon, a living thing, and it wasn't alone. Behind it, an endless procession of other, similar ships poured from a rift, their forms shifting like kaleidoscopic nightmares, tearing apart the space around them. "What the hell is that?" Riker muttered under his breath, his eyes wide with disbelief as he watched the formation of ships take shape. "This can't be real." "It's real," Clara said, her voice tense, barely a whisper. And it's only the beginning. We need to get out of here, Riker suggested, his fingers flying over the control panel, preparing for evasive maneuvers. The Exodus can't fight something like that. Clara's gaze never wavered from the rift. They will serve us. The voice had been clear, direct, and yet it carried an ominous promise. She knew the situation was dire, impossibly dire, but there was something she couldn't shake. A sense that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. This was bigger. Much bigger. Stay in position, Clara ordered, her voice sharp, commanding. We're not running from this. We're going to find out who or what these things are and why they've come. Keep communications open. If anyone knows what the hell is going on, it's the Fleet Command. On the other side of the galaxy, the galactic coalition of Kthar, Halari, and other factions were already mobilizing in response to the unfolding disaster. Supreme Commander Auric stood at the War Council's table, staring down at a projection of the event. The size of the rift, the appearance of the ships, the catastrophic waves of energy spilling from Earth. This was something that none of their combined forces could hope to face. We need to prepare for the worst, Auric said, his voice grim. This is no longer just about fighting the Terrans. Whatever these things are, they're not just a threat to humanity. They're a threat to the entire galaxy. We need to coordinate our response, Valis of the Halari interjected. But we cannot underestimate them. We are facing a force that operates outside the very fabric of our universe. This is not war as we know it. This is something else. Something alive, Zara, the Halari diplomat, added quietly, her eyes narrowed. Something that moves through dimensions and shapes reality itself. Are you suggesting that the rift is more than just a portal? Auric growled. Are you telling me that these things are alive in a way we cannot understand? Valis met Auric's gaze, his expression deadly serious. Yes, and if we don't unite against them, it will be the end of everything we know. Back on the Exodus, Clara stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of space where the rift loomed ominously, pulsing and breathing with a malevolent life. The fleet was in position, its guns trained on the massive creature and its fleet, but Clara knew this was no ordinary battle. They weren't facing a conventional enemy. These were not soldiers, not fleets. They were the harbingers of something incomprehensible. Admiral, Riker said, his voice tight. We've detected strange fluctuations in the fabric of space near the rift. It's like it's trying to pull us in. The Exodus is holding steady, but we're being dragged toward them. Something's feeding on our energy. The realization hit Clara like a punch to the gut. It's not just a gateway. It's a trap. She turned to the view screen, where the giant creature ship loomed, its form shifting. It was as though it was observing them, calculating, waiting. And behind it, the endless procession of ships, each one a twisted echo of the first, emerging from the rift. Their presence was suffocating, an overwhelming sense of being watched, of being out of place, out of time. Then, without warning, the creature's ship spoke again, but this time it wasn't just a voice. It was a command, a mental presence, like a weight pressing down on the minds of the entire fleet. You will serve. You will bend to us. You have no choice but to submit. Clara felt it, the overwhelming pull of the message, not just through her ears, but deep in her mind. It was invasive in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just a command, it was a compulsion, a force trying to bend her will. No, Clara whispered. We will never serve you. She resisted the pull, fighting against the alien presence that tried to worm its way into her mind. She focused, forcing her will into the command chair, tightening her grip on the situation. Captain. Riker's voice trembled, as though he too could feel it. The fleet's energy output is dropping. We're being drained. Not on my watch, Clara growled. She turned to the crew. Initiate all emergency protocols. We're not going to let this thing consume us. But as she spoke, the rift pulsed again, this time sending a shockwave through the fleet. Ships from the coalition, now arriving in waves to respond, were scattered, their formations broken apart by the sheer force of the energy. One by one, the Terran ships began to warp, disappearing into the shifting space-time rift, swallowed by the force that now controlled the galaxy's very fabric. On the other side of the galaxy, Auric, Vallis, and Zara watched helplessly as their fleets too began to break apart under the same invisible pressure. No one could explain it. No one knew how to stop it. The galaxy, once teeming with life and hope, was now on the precipice of extinction. In the distance beyond the rift, something stirred, something ancient, powerful, and undeniably alive. And as the voices of the stars began to grow silent, the one truth became clear. They were not fighting just for the survival of humanity. They were fighting for everything. And it was already too late. Clara Solis stood on the bridge of the Exodus, her face pale as she watched the terrible procession of ships spill forth from the rift. Their presence, like an encroaching storm, consumed everything. Reality itself was beginning to crack under the strain, space warping and bending as if caught in the grip of some unseen hand. The fleet, once a proud symbol of humanity's return, was now caught in a cosmic struggle for survival, its power slowly draining away into the rift. "We need to break free," Riker said, his voice strained, his hands gripping the console. The ship's energy output was plummeting, and the fleet's formation was splintering under the pressure. "If we don't act fast, we'll be pulled in too." Clara's thoughts raced. She could feel the force of the rift pressing against her mind, its presence like an invasive parasite clawing at her consciousness, attempting to force her will into submission. The voice, the compulsion to serve, it was not just a threat to their physical survival. It was an existential one. "We need to find a way to sever the link between us and the rift," Clara said, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "Prepare for an emergency jump. We need to get outside the rift's influence, now." "But we don't even know where the rift ends." Riker protested. "We're already being torn apart, Captain. The rift's energy is too powerful." Clara's gaze hardened. "We don't have a choice." She could feel the pull of the rift intensifying. The ships around them, both human and coalition forces, were all weakening, their engines sputtering as the life force of their vessels was slowly siphoned away. Some ships had already disappeared into the heart of the anomaly, their fates sealed by the same unknowable force that had brought the rift into being. Clara's mind flashed back to the hollow gate on Earth. The time has come for humanity to return, but it is not just the galaxy you will reclaim. You will shape reality itself. The cryptic message had left a heavy weight in her heart. She had unlocked something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. And now they were paying the price. "We don't need to understand it," Clara said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "We need to survive long enough to fight back." She turned to the fleet communications officer, her eyes narrowing. "Send out the distress signal. Tell every surviving ship to initiate emergency jumps. We're breaking the link, even if it kills us." Far across the galaxy, in the heart of the Kthar fleet, Supreme Commander Auric's command ship bucked under the pressure of the rift's energy. His gaze was fixed on the holographic projection of the rift, its core pulsating with an alien force, like a heartbeat that threatened to tear apart the fabric of the galaxy itself. "We are losing," Auric spat, his voice heavy with rage. "We're being overwhelmed. The Exodus. The Terrans, they must have a way out. We need to follow them." At the War Council, Vallis of the Halari looked just as grim. "If the Terrans are initiating a jump, we have to risk it. We can't stay here." "Prepare for a coordinated jump," Auric barked, turning to his officers. "We have no other choice. We either survive or we perish." In the distance, another shock wave from the rift spread outward, sending an army of distorted ships, those that had emerged from the anomaly, rushing forward. They were not just a fleet. They were a swarm, an unstoppable force of living vessels, each one a manifestation of the rift's will. The Kthar ships, though massive and powerful, were not designed for a battle against an unknown living force. This was not a war of tactics or strategy. It was a war for existence. And it was clear. If they didn't act fast, they would be wiped out, their entire race consumed by the rift's hunger. Back on the Exodus, Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her heart raced, the weight of command pressing heavily upon her shoulders. Riker, initiate the jump sequence. Now. But even as Riker began the calculations, something caught Clara's eye, a distortion, a flicker in the rift. She felt it, a shift in the very air around her, as though something vast and ancient was stirring, its attention focused on the fleet. "Captain, we've got a problem," Riker said, his voice tight. "The rift is destabilizing. It's reacting to the energy fluctuations from our jump sequence. We're going to be pulled into it before we can escape." Clara's mind raced. The rift was alive. It was a consciousness, and it knew they were trying to flee. And, worse, it was starting to close the gaps, locking them in. "We don't have much time," Clara said, her mind snapping into action. "Activate the emergency cloaking protocols. If we can't escape, at least we can hide our signature long enough to break free." The Exodus's cloaking systems hummed to life, sending waves of energy across the ship's surface. It wasn't much, just enough to mask them for a few precious moments. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As the crew rushed to execute her orders, Clara's eyes stayed on the rift, watching as its surface warped and cracked. Something was emerging from it, something far larger than any of the ships they had seen before. The massive creature, a vessel more alive than machine, began to move toward them. Its form seemed to pulse with malevolent intent, its surface shifting in and out of shape like some twisted fusion of organic matter and pure energy. "We're running out of time," Riker shouted. Clara's pulse quickened as the creature closed the distance. But she wasn't going to let it have them, not without a fight. "Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. If we can't escape, we'll make them chase us." But just as the Exodus began to move, another shock wave of energy erupted from the rift. This time, it was different. The space around them fractured, bending in on itself, pulling at their very molecules as the rift's presence grew stronger. In that moment, Clara understood. The rift was not just a doorway. It was a gate, a conduit to something far beyond their universe, a force that existed to reshape, consume, and control. And they had unknowingly become its prey. "Hold on," Clara shouted, gritting her teeth as the ship shuddered beneath her. "We're not going down without a fight." The world, or what remained of it, had dissolved into chaos. The rift's pull had consumed everything, pulling at the very fabric of space and time. One moment, Clara had been standing on the bridge of the Exodus, watching in horror as the galaxy's fate slipped out of their hands. The next, the ship had been torn from the stars, plunged into the heart of the rift itself. It was impossible to describe the sensation. Space twisted and contorted around them, stars flaring and collapsing into nothingness, worlds flickering in and out of existence. The Exodus bucked and screamed as if the rift itself was alive, its massive form caught in the gravitational grasp of something far beyond any understanding. Inside, the crew struggled to keep their footing as the ship's hull shuddered under the strain. "Status report," Clara barked, gripping the armrest of her command chair as another violent tremor rocked the ship. Riker's voice came through, shaky but determined. "We're still here, Captain. But the rift is different now. The space around us, it's bending. Not just in front of us, but all around us. We've crossed into something else. I can't get a lock on anything. There's no way to tell where we are." Clara's mind raced. This wasn't just a breach into another dimension. This was something far worse. She could feel it now, an oppressive presence that pressed down on her thoughts, a weight that seemed to be everywhere, watching them, waiting. The crew had been working tirelessly to stabilize the ship, but the pressure of the rift was unlike anything they'd faced before. There was no up or down, no direction. Only endless shifting patterns of light and dark, the boundaries of reality itself seeming to break down. Every flicker of the ship's lights, every hum of its engines, felt like a desperate gasp for air in a place where breathing seemed futile. "We're being followed," Riker said, his voice quieter now, almost fearful. "What do you mean?" Clara asked, the weight of his words settling on her chest like a stone. "I don't know how to explain it, Captain," Riker continued, his fingers flying across the control panel. "But there's something moving alongside us. A presence, like the rift's guardians. I can feel them. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Guardians. The ships that had poured from the rift were no longer just an army. They were something more. Watching. Waiting. Her mind flashed back to the voice she'd heard earlier, the one that had commanded them. You will serve. It had not been an idle threat. The rift's true purpose was becoming all too clear. They weren't just a force of destruction. They were an invasive consciousness, consuming and reshaping everything in its path. Keep us moving, Clara commanded, forcing herself to stay calm. Get us out of here. But even as she spoke, the ship's alarms began to blare, signaling a new threat. Something outside the Exodus was approaching, fast, powerful, and undeniable. On the view screen, a dark shape began to materialize in the shifting space. It was enormous, larger than any ship they had encountered, its form dark and nebulous, swirling with energy. It wasn't like the other vessels that had emerged from the rift. It was alive, its surface rippling like skin, its movement graceful yet predatory. That's it, Riker said, his voice filled with a note of disbelief. That's the one. The thing that's been watching us. The creature's form shimmered as it moved closer, its surface ever-changing. One moment it seemed like a massive, tendrilled organism. The next, it was a living labyrinth of light and shadow. It was far too large to be any conventional ship. It was a living entity, like a god that had materialized from the dark abyss beyond the rift. Get us away from it, Clara ordered, but deep down, she knew it was too late. The creature had already locked onto them. It wasn't just following them. It was hunting them. Before Riker could respond, the rift pulsed again. A massive wave of energy rippled out from the creature, shaking the Exodus violently. The ship's systems began to flicker, losing power as the energy from the rift coursed through them. The Exodus groaned, its hull creaking under the strain. Captain, we're losing power. Riker shouted. The energy from that thing is interfering with our systems. We're being pulled in. Clara's mind raced. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Focus all remaining energy on the jump drive. Clara ordered. We can't let it pull us in. We have to break free now. But as Riker tried to comply, something unexpected happened. The rift itself responded. The living creature, the vessel, seemed to communicate with the rift, and the space around them began to twist more violently. It was as though the rift was an extension of the creature's will, an infinite connection that bound them together. We're inside it now, Riker murmured, his voice filled with awe and dread. We've crossed the threshold. This isn't just a battle for survival anymore. We're in its domain. Clara's thoughts whirled as the pressure on her mind grew stronger. You will serve. The words echoed in her head, louder now, deeper. She could feel the rift's will trying to claim her, trying to make her one with it. But Clara Solis wasn't one to submit. Not now. Not ever. With every ounce of strength she had left, Clara focused on one thing, the will to survive. She pushed through the mental compulsion that sought to bend her mind to its will. They had come this far. They would not be slaves. Do it, Riker, she shouted. Make the jump. As Riker hit the button, the engines roared to life, thrusting them forward. But before they could make their escape, a final pulse of energy surged from the creature. The Exodus shuddered violently, and for a brief moment, Clara felt as though the universe itself was unraveling around them. And then they were gone. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The Exodus and the rift, along with the nightmarish creature, were no longer visible. The galaxy had shifted, fractured into something unrecognizable. The crew of the Exodus had fought their way through the unknown, but now they were lost in the heart of it. Their fate and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. But Clara knew one thing for certain. This war wasn't over. Not yet. The Exodus was adrift in the void, alone in the strange new space beyond the rift. The stars were distant, as though they had never been part of the same universe. The ship's systems flickered, barely holding together after the strain of the jump, and the crew, though silent, moved with the grim understanding that the battle had only just begun. Clara Solis stood alone in the observation deck, gazing into the abyss. The rift had closed behind them, leaving only the faintest aftershocks of its presence. She could still feel it deep inside her bones, in the very marrow of her existence. The rift was a consciousness, a sentient force, and its will had left its mark on her mind. She wasn't alone. In the depths of the ship, the crew had begun to experience the same weight, an oppressive pressure in their thoughts. The rift's influence, though distant, lingered. And it wasn't just the crew. The ship itself seemed to hum in tune with something deeper, something darker. The ship had crossed into a space between dimensions, a liminal place that was neither here nor there, where the rules of reality no longer applied. They were alone, but they were not free. "Captain." Riker's voice crackled over the comms, a little hesitant. "We've got a problem. We're picking up some kind of energy signature. It's not a ship. It's like a pulse. Like the rift itself is alive. I think it's following us." Clara's heart sank. It wasn't enough that the rift had nearly consumed them. Now, whatever had been born from it was hunting them. And they couldn't run. Not when they were in this strange, fractured place. "Shut down all non-essential systems," Clara said, her voice tight with command. "If it's trying to track us, we can't let it have any more of our energy." The crew scrambled, trying to mask their presence, but Clara knew it was a losing battle. The rift's pulse was like a beacon. It was alive, and it could feel them just as they could feel it. Meanwhile, across the shattered remnants of the galaxy, factions were reeling from the same cataclysm. The Kthar, the Halari, and the other races of the Galactic Coalition had witnessed the Exodus and its fleet vanish into the rift, and they were desperate to understand what had happened. Some feared the worst, that the rift was not just a rift in space, but a permanent tear in the fabric of reality itself. Supreme Commander Auric stood at the helm of the Kthar flagship, staring into the void. The energy from the rift had twisted the very laws of space. Entire fleets had been swallowed, never to be seen again. Those that had survived, like the Kthar, were scattered across a galaxy they no longer recognized. Their weapons, their tactics, everything they had relied on seemed meaningless in the face of this new threat. "We cannot let this stand," Auric said, turning to his council. "Humanity has found a way to survive in the rift. We must learn from them. We must. Act quickly, or we will all perish," Valus of the Halari interjected. His voice was cold, but filled with purpose. "This thing that the Terrans encountered, this consciousness, it is not just a threat to them. It is a threat to everything we know." "You believe it will consume us?" Auric asked. Valus nodded grimly. "If we don't find a way to unite against it, it will. The rift is not a doorway to another place. It is a weapon with intelligence, and it is slowly shaping this galaxy in its image." Back on the Exodus, Clara stood at the center of the command deck, her face set with determination. Riker had finished his scan. The rift's pulse was drawing closer, its signature becoming unmistakable. And in the distance, beyond the distortion of space, they saw it, a vast shifting form, not quite solid, not quite real, but undeniably there. The creature was back, and this time it wasn't alone. More of the living ships, the ones that had poured from a rift, began to materialize around the Exodus, like predators closing in on their prey. Their forms were ever shifting, like creatures of nightmare, too fluid to fully understand. They radiated an unnatural power, each one an extension of the rift itself. Clara's mind was spinning, trying to devise a plan. There was no escape, no time. The only thing she could do was face it head on. "We're going to need more than weapons," Clara said, her voice low and resolute. "We need to learn what the rift wants. We need to understand it, or we won't survive. Get me everything we have on rift energy patterns. I want to know how it thinks, how it breathes." Riker nodded, and the crew worked quickly, scanning every inch of the alien data they'd gathered from the rift and its creatures. They had no answers, yet, but Clara wasn't ready to give up. She had fought this hard to survive, and if there was a way to turn the tide, she would find it. As the alien ships closed in on the Exodus, Clara stood tall. She wasn't about to let the rift consume humanity. Not without a fight. The silence that followed was suffocating. The crew felt the weight of the approaching force, the pressure of inevitability bearing down on them. But Clara felt something else, too. There was a flicker of hope in her chest. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more, for a chance to reclaim the galaxy, and to break the chains the rift sought to place on them. "We may be in the heart of darkness," Clara said, her voice steady, "but we are humanity. And as long as we breathe, we will fight. We will never bow. We will never serve." And with that, the Exodus surged forward, its engines roaring to life, ready to challenge the darkness and fight for a future that was still theirs to claim. As the Exodus and the alien fleet locked in a deadly dance, the galaxy itself held its breath. A new war had begun, one where the stakes were higher than ever. Humanity had returned, but now it would face its greatest trial: the struggle for freedom in a universe that sought to consume it. The rift would not give up its prize easily, but neither would humanity. The galaxy, once again, would scream. But this time, it would scream for them.